Well, I'm glad to be here. The lights are bright. Um, I've been following your group from afar. I'm glad that you're able to be here and celebrate with God. I'd just like to pray again before we get started. Dear Lord, as we talk tonight about some of the guidance that you've given us, I ask you to help us to understand it. Give me wisdom and help me to present it in a way that will make you look good. For I ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
So I'm not here as an expert, but I'm here as somebody who's a fellow struggler. And I thought I would start out with a familiar Bible verse that we all know. And God said, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. And I wondered for a long time, what does eating and drinking have to do with giving glory to God? Is he all hung up about what I eat and drink? And I guess I came to the conclusion he's really not hung up about it, but he wants me to have the best life I can have. So he'd give me some advice. What I'm going to talk about tonight is really not from an Adventist source, but it goes very close with what we've been given from the Adventist source. And sometimes when we hear it from somebody else, it gets our attention more than the same thing we've heard. But let me kind of tell you a little bit about me. I mean, what I'm famous for is being Carolyn's brother, but other than that, I'm was a physician who was in practice in Hinsdale for many years in family practice, and then moved down here, and for 20 years was director of the ER, the hospital here in Fletcher. But I had an interest in health education and been on over 20 overseas mission trips doing health education, and a number in the States as well. But I would come home from those trips sometimes, and my son, who's not attending church, would say to me, Dad, you go over here and give all these health lectures, and I see you slobbing butter on your bread. What's the deal? And I said, well, I'll try to be careful. But I was way overweight, good health otherwise, exercised, thought I was in good health. But I've learned some things, and it was about 14 months ago that my wife and I were looking for a reset, so to speak. And we talked to a friend who I knew had been interested in her health and she actually had to have back surgery. And the doctor told her she had to lose 50 pounds before she could have back surgery. And she ended up losing 88 pounds in 1 year. So I said, she knows something that's working. And I knew her well enough to know it was not some crazy thing. But she was doing it all plant-based. And so we talked with her, and she introduced us to a book that I highly recommend. It's called The Engine 2 7-Day Rescue Diet by Rip Esselstyn. Some of you may have heard of Dr. Esselstyn. This is his son. And was a world-class triathlete for many years. And then he became a fireman in Austin, Texas. And one day on a whim, my son's a fireman, so a lot of these firemen work 24 hours and they're off 48 and back again. So these guys live together and they're just kind of family. And so as they're sitting around talking, he says to one of them, I wonder who's got the best cholesterol. Why don't we go get our cholesterols checked? So they all went and got their cholesterols checked. And one of the guys came back as 335. Shouldn't be over 200, preferably less than that. And so they decided that they were all, since they were a family, for the next month, they would all eat a plant-strong diet, and help him get his cholesterol down. Ends up in 4 weeks, his cholesterol was down from 335 to 200, 185, 185. So it really got their attention that this thing, it does make a difference. And so Rip wrote a book, and this is actually the second book he's written. And in this book, he talks about the 7 pillars of success. I thought we would just briefly go through those. We'll talk about some of them more than others. And the first one is that's a positive way of saying don't eat animals. Animal food, as you probably know, animal foods, a lot of them are very inflammatory. And that's the way that the body reacts to the animal foods. And the meat and dairy are all combined together into animal foods. And just for the record, all my life I'd been a, quote, once when I was in Vietnam in the service, and realized if I was going to have nutrition at all, I was going to have some animal nutrition. I won't tell you the steak. Not to like it, and was really glad to get out of there and get some back to something else. And the inflammation is caused by free radicals. That's a fancy term, that something that the body does to make a person more prone to get inflammation. There's a number of things, and just a few of the things about the animal foods. It also can raise your cholesterol. I don't know if you're aware that plant foods have 0 cholesterol. The only cholesterol you can get is from animal foods. Having said that, you need some cholesterol because every cell in your body has cholesterol in the cell wall. But God took care of that because your liver will make cholesterol. You don't need to get it by eating it. So the animals, or the animal food is the only place you can get cholesterol. They found that a lot of the animal foods are cancer producing, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And there's also no fiber in any animal food. Fiber only comes from plants and vegetables. And so it's interesting that, can you see that? I can hardly see it here, but the plants average 64 times more oxidants than anything you get in animal food. Antioxidants are the chemical that we need to help fight the free radicals that are causing the inflammation, things develop into cancer and hardening of the artery, and all those things really can go back to this inflammation in this whole process. They found that people who are on a high animal diet, if you put all causes of death together, there's 50% more deaths in those people than the ones who are not eating that. The dairy and meat are high in omega-6 fatty acids. You've heard about omega-3s, and there's omega-3s and omega-6s. And the omega-6s are the bad guys, the 3s are the good guys. So these foods are very high in the omega-6s, and that can lead to problems, more cancers particularly. So it doesn't matter whether it's meat, dairy, or cheese, milk or cheese, all those things are high in the omega-6s. I like the way they call in here. They said milk is liquid meat. Another time they called it cow secretions. Cheese is solid meat. So the dairy is a problem, and we'll talk a little more about that, but it is something that can cause a problem. The other thing about dairy is it's very high in growth hormone, and growth hormone is important to cows. I mean, you think about one of the things that milk is intended to do is take a 60-pound calf when it's born to a 1,200-pound cow in a year. So it better have some growth hormone and better have some things to help the cow do that. So one of the questions comes up when you say, well, you need to go easy on or cut out the dairy. The question I get most often is, what about osteoporosis? The dairy industry has done a great job of trying to sell us on the fact that dairy products are the cure or prevention of osteoporosis. You know what osteoporosis is when you get the weak bones. Interesting statistic they don't tell you, the countries in the world that have the highest dairy consumption also have the highest incidence of osteoporosis. And they do that because they say dairy is high in calcium, which is true. But it's got so much protein that as you're digesting the protein, you have to burn up the calcium to digest the protein. So you get rid of that. And when I was in Africa a few times on mission trips, I got to see some of the animals in the wild. You see the giraffe, you see the hippopotamus, the elephant, all these big animals. I never saw one laying by the roadside with a broken hip. I never saw one of them drinking milk. And I think that it's important that we understand that it's not necessary to drink milk to avoid osteoporosis. In fact, where do you get your calcium? Your greens are very high in calcium and can be very helpful. There was a couple of quotes that I thought were important. Do you know who Dr. Michael Greger is? He's written the book, How Not to Die. He is in charge of the nutritionfacts.org website, Peak in Asheville. And he's a physician who all he does is read the literature and has people to help him read all the literature. As he said, I read all the World Health literature so you don't have to. And then he boils it down and comes out with little things that can help with that. The interesting story behind this book, How Not to Die, are you aware of how he got the title for that book? His grandmother. When he was a kid, his grandmother was so sick that she went to the doctors and they told her she had congestive heart failure and she was going to die. Go home and get your things in order. And instead of doing that, she apparently lived on the West Coast and went to see Nathan Pritikin, who was just beginning to do some things in lifestyle medicine, and changed her diet and so forth. And she lived another 15 years, was very rigorous, came to his medical school graduation. So he names it after her, How Not to Die. But he said, and I heard him give this lecture, of the 15 leading causes of death in the world, all can be prevented or helped by a whole food plant-based diet. The abbreviation WFPB, you'll see that, and that's kind of the buzzword these days, is the whole food plant-based. And we'll talk a little more about what that means a little later on. There's another physician who's very well known, Dr. Kim Williams. He was the president of the American College of Cardiology. He was the past president, now I think one or two, but I've heard him talk. And he has a couple of quotable quotes that I thought were good. He said, there are two kinds of cardiologists, those who are plant-based and those who haven't read the research. So he's saying the research is there, that it's just out of ignorance that people don't do that. And then the other one that he said was, somebody asked him, well, why are you? He said, because meat kills you and processed meat kills you. So he was very concerned about that. The second one of the pillars is not only eat plants, but to eat whole foods. And what do we mean by whole foods? Whole food is a food in its natural condition, their natural plant form, not processed highly. And just as an example, the old potato gets a lot of criticism, is 2% fat. And we take it and make it into French fries, and it suddenly becomes 51% fat. So we take a food God gave us and we'll not only put the fat on it, we'll also add salt, dip it in another processed vegetable called ketchup, which usually is high in high fructose corn syrup and sugar, and then eat it. That's not eating the way it was intended to be eaten. In fact, if you eat a whole potato with its skin, it has more vitamin C than orange juice. It has more potassium than bananas. And it has more fiber as much fiber as a bowl of oatmeal. So the potato has gotten a bad name because of the stuff we do to it and the stuff we put on it and how we treat it. But that potato is a good example of a whole food. Interestingly enough, the average American diet only has about 6% of its calories from whole food. 94% of the calories come from processed foods. So you hear people talk about being a vegetarian, being a vegan, and then now this thing about this whole food, plant-based. So a vegan tells you what you don't eat. A vegan is someone who doesn't eat dairy or cheese, milk, right?
Anything with a face.
But a whole food plant-based tells you what you do eat. You eat the plants. You eat things. There is a lot of vegan junk food. Just because something's vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. After all, Oreos are vegan. Potato chips can be vegan. You know, all these things that may not be the best for us that are vegan. So what they're saying is that's not enough. We need to think of it more as the whole food plant-based. Here's a quotation that's a little long, but I think it's worth reading. And this is in vegan entrees that have more sodium than the Red Sea. Or vegan buttery spreads that have more fat than Fat Albert. Or vegan chips and crackers that have more oil than the Arabian. Or vegan cookies and cakes that have more sugar than a Krispy Kreme factory. And vegan hot dogs, hamburgers, and other pseudo meats that have more isolated soy proteins than a tub of muscle milk that we may have thought of as good foods can have some of their problems. And one of the things that's interesting, most Americans get the majority of their calorie from 3 ingredients in food. Do you know what they are?
Oil, sugar.
Sugar, fat, salt, flour.
Number 1 is white flour. Number 2 is oil. So those are the 3 things that the majority of the calories often come from. None of those are whole food plant-based, by the way. So talking of oil, all processed oil is unnecessary and unhealthy, is what they say. Now, a lot of us have used oil for years. You say, how am I going to cook things if I don't have oil? My wife has discovered it can be done. But, and we'll talk a little later, a little bit more about oil, some of the challenges with it. But obviously, it's processed. It's not whole food. It's very processed. And it's the most calorie-dense food in the world. And we'll talk about calorie density in a couple of minutes. But it's interesting with that. And people say, oh, I understand, but what about olive oil? Isn't olive oil okay? Well, let's just look at olive oil for a minute. It's 100% fat. There's almost no vitamins or minerals. 1 tablespoon is 120 calories of fat. And you always use at least 1 tablespoon, if not more. And it takes 1,300 olives to make a 32-ounce bottle of olive oil. And so 1 tablespoon of olive oil has the amount of fat equal to 45 olives. So olives are a great food, but when you concentrate it and process it, it becomes just so concentrated that it can be toxic. So one of the things when you're shopping is a general rule, the shorter the ingredient list, the better the food's more likely to be. And the less processed it is, the better. That raises a question that might be to this group. What about these things?
Good Adventist food.
We call it health food. Is it? It's interesting. In the last few months, both Dr. Kim Williams that I told you about, and also another person who's very well known in lifestyle medicine, Dr. Dean Ornish, talk about the Beyond Burgers that they have at some of the fast food places. And he said, when you really analyze them, yes, they're vegan, but they're not as healthy as the meat. You'd be better off to have the hamburger from a health standpoint. That's not encouraging to get the hamburger, but he's just saying they're so processed, and they actually have a lot of coconut fat in them and other things. And if you read the ingredient list, when you can't pronounce a lot of names, it's a good idea. That's probably not the best food. So, for a long time, we as Adventists have said, if you refine carbohydrate, you get sugar, and that's not good to have too much of that. If you refine fat, you can get high-fat things that aren't too good for you. But somehow we said if you refine the protein and put it in something, we'll call it health food. And it always bothered me is how we could be that insensitive. But it's not just Adventists. There are other people who eat this stuff too. So the one thing that comes up is, what about supplements? If we're saying you want to eat the whole food, there's only one supplement that's generally recommended for someone who's eating a whole food plant-based diet, and that's vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is found in dirt. And we've cleaned things up so much. We don't have our gardens where you get the dirt on your things. Things are washed and scrubbed and treated so that we're not getting that. So that's the one supplement that's probably advantageous to take. Pillar number 3, don't drink your calories. Americans drink about a quarter to half of their calories. And kids often get more calories from sodas and fruit juices and smoothies and cow secretion than they get from chewing real food. So it's something to think about. You know, why do we drink so many things? A lot of the things we drink, we would think would be good. For example, orange juice. I mean, what's wrong with orange juice? I know you've all, at some point in your life, probably squeezed oranges to make orange juice. How many oranges does it take to make a glass of orange juice? It depends on how juicy the oranges are. But usually 3 or 4 oranges. And by the time you get the juice made, you drink and say, that was good, I think I'll have another one. If you had to eat those 3 or 4 oranges, you'd be full. But when you drink the juice, well, that was good, let's get started. I'm just getting started. We've left behind all the fiber, and the fiber is what helps the body to absorb it at a more reasonable rate instead of getting this rush of sugar that goes into the body. And so we can see that can be helpful to eat the fruit rather than drink the juice. Now, this is another startling thing. Fruit juice can be as unhealthy as soda. A 12-ounce can of Coke has 140 calories, 40 grams of sugar. So if you want to replace that with a 12-ounce bottle of or glass of apple juice, you have 165 calories, a little bit better, and 39 grams of sugar. So it's basically the same as what you would get from the Coke. So the best thing is not to drink our calories, with possibly one exception, which Patty will talk to you about later. They don't, like I said, they don't fill you. It gives you a sudden spike of sugar. When you eat the whole fruit, it's slowly absorbed. So people have often said to me, well, then maybe help prevent weight gain. They did an interesting study and included 75,000 people. And they found out that actually the ones who drank drinks gained more weight and ate more, because there's the artificial sweeteners will stimulate your appetite. And so that can be a problem. So to sum it up, breastfeeding should be the only time you drink calories. Having said that, what about breast milk versus cow's milk? Just an interesting statistic that I wasn't aware of. We think that they're about equivalent, but just take the protein. Breast milk has 2.5 grams of protein in a glass of breast milk, and cow's milk has 8 grams, so it's 4 times more protein. That makes sense when we're trying to grow this 1,200-pound cow, but we're not trying to grow 1,200-pound babies. But if you go in the grocery store, you'll see a lot of babies are getting pretty heavy these days because of what they're being fed. Well, another liquid that we at least need to talk about is alcohol. Um, and it's easy to sum that up, that alcohol is a poison to every cell in your body. We can talk about the liver, yes, the liver, because that's where it tries to get rid of it, but every cell in your body. There's good statistics that every time you drink one drink, you lose brain cells. I don't know about you. I know God made us with gobs of extra brain cells, but I feel like I need all I've got. They're showing that the brain actually shrinks, and it's just been in the last year or two, the World Health Organization and the American, I think it was the Heart Association, the Cancer Association, have both said there is no amount of alcohol that's safe to drink. I mean, we've known that for a long time, but it's interesting to see that science is catching up with us. Another thing about, I don't have a slide about this, but when you're drinking juices or other things that may have good things in them, you don't chew them. And just in the last year or two, there's been research that shows by chewing and mixing the saliva with these things, you actually stimulate a hormone that causes more nitric oxide in your little arteries, and nitric oxide causes them to dilate. So it increases the blood supply just through the act of chewing. There's still discussion whether that happens if you make smoothies. I think the jury's out on that, but it's the breaking it up and also mixing the saliva with it is helpful. Milk, we've talked about a little bit. There's also increased milk has been associated with prostate cancer and other cancers. We've heard about the increased estrogen that people get from that, as well as the other things that are added to it. But really, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Cow's milk is really a great food for baby cows. So we're not anti-cow's milk. The other liquid that we drink is water. I see a lot of people with water bottles sitting around here. What about water? Is that worthwhile? Most people don't realize that our body is 60 to 70% water, and babies are up to 75% water. So it doesn't take a lot to get dehydrated. Brain is one of the first places where it will show up because your brain is so water soluble. It's got so much water in it. And so you can get sleepy, you can get irritated, you can get confused just by not getting enough water. We see this in the emergency room all the time. People come in that are dehydrated. I remember one of my friends, it was one of my partners in practice, said he was going to run I think it was a 5K, but he hadn't been doing much running. And he got running along, and finally he was standing on the street babbling, and we went to see him what was going on, and he was just dehydrated. I mean, it can do crazy things. So no matter who you are or where you are, it's important that you drink water. One of the questions people ask is how much water? One of the little handy rules to think about is you probably should drink a half an ounce of water for every pound of your weight, up to a gallon a day. We say, usually people say 8 glasses, but that's probably on the low side. Probably need even more than that. Pillar number 4 is avoid calorie-dense foods. And I know you can't read this chart, but it's still interesting. It's talking about the density of food. And what do we mean by calorie density? It's basically a simple way to think of it is how many calories are there in a pound of it? If you have a pound of this and a pound of that, which one's got more calories in it? And as you can see over here on the left-hand side, you can see the thing there, vegetables and fruits. Vegetable, 100. You get up to legumes, 600. And then you get into the grains and legumes. You can get into ice cream, you're up to 1,200 calories per pound. And all the junk food over there, potato chips and junk food, you're over 2,000 calories per pound. And then you get over to nuts, which are high, and the oils, and the highest thing there is oil, which is 4,000 calories per pound. So what they're suggesting is we eat more to the left of the chart and less to the right of the chart. Particularly if you're concerned about your weight. One of the things about Americans is we're not very good at moderation. We tend to go all out on something. If we find something we like, we tend to want more of it. And the other thing that's interesting is, as far as your body is concerned, your body doesn't have a calorie meter. You don't get full based on how many calories you've had. You get full based on the volume you've had. So the fewer calories you can get in a larger volume, the better it's going to be. For example, 3.5 pound watermelon, if you eat the whole thing, has 450 calories. Whereas 3.5 pounds of Swiss cheese has over 6,000 calories. So you can see the difference in the calorie density. If you had a 5 pounds of carbohydrates, 5 pounds of fat, and 5 pounds of protein, which is going to have the most calories? The fat will be almost double the amount of calories that are in the carbohydrates and the proteins. So the pillar number 5 is limit your protein. Our protein should probably be 5 to 10% of our daily calories. And the average American eats over 30% of their calories from protein. If you tell someone you're not eating animal products, the first question they usually ask you is, how do you get your protein? And I finally come up with a good answer. The same place the cow gets his, from plants. You know, we think of the cow and it's got all this protein, and where did it get it from? It got it from the plants. The animal proteins make the body acidic, and that leads to leaching calcium from the bones, and that can help with your osteoporosis also. And the other question people say, well, are plant proteins a complete protein? When I was younger, we were taught, that meat was a more complete protein than plants. That's been proven to be wrong. Plants give you all the proteins that you need. Number 6 is limit your salt, sugar, and fat intake. Fat, sugar, and fat are added by the food industry to lots of food because they're addicting. And they want you to come back and buy more food. And so they're going to put these things in to try to get you hooked on their foods. So how much sodium should you get? A simple rule of thumb that I find helpful, when you go to the store and you look at the label, fortunately now since the 50s, they've had to put nutrition information on the labels. If you look at the label, this grams of sodium should be about the same as the number of calories or less. Occasionally be a little bit more, certainly not more than twice as much. So if you have something that's 100 calories and it has 100 grams of sodium, that's okay. Milligrams, yeah, right, milligrams. There's about 1,500 milligrams in a teaspoon, so we actually need less than a teaspoon a day of sodium. But if you use that guide and looking at labels, it'll help you to understand. It's not what they put on the front of the can that's important. It's what the nutritional information on the back of the can says. So as far as sugar, a little rule of thumb is you don't want sugar to be in one of the top 3 ingredients on the list of ingredients. They have to put the ingredients in from the one that's the most down to the least. So you don't want sugar in the top 3 is a good rule of thumb for how much sugar. And sugar comes by many names.
Yeah.
So you have to look at some of the other names that may be in there too. If it ends in OSE, it's likely a sugar.
OSC.
OSE, like glucose, lactose, fructose. Some of them get a lot longer. So dried fruits are another food that's high in calories. Better to eat the fruit fresh or the way it comes. An example is 2 cups of grapes would equal the same amount of calories as a quarter of a cup of raisins. So you can see that there's calorie dense. So if you're going to eat the dried things, be careful. So if you need to lose weight or feel better, eat a wide variety of low calorie dense foods. Number 7. Did we skip 6? Okay. Number 7 is exercise most days. People say, what kind of exercise is best to do? My answer is whatever you'll do. Get off the couch and move. Walking is a great exercise. I happen to like to ride bikes. But unfortunately, the exercise most of us like is trying to hold the rake up. Well, we're taking it easy. So we've covered a lot of things, and it ends up that you're going to have to make some choices. We have to choose how we want to take care of ourselves. And we need to make the right choices. Sometimes we're really stressed trying to do that. And a lot of us are addicted, and we feel like we're trying to break the chains to get free from our addiction. But I think I like these 7 pillars because that's something that's tangible we can look at to see what the 7 things are that can be a help. And reviewing them, it's the eat plants, eat whole foods, chew your calories, avoid calorie-dense foods, limit your protein, limit your salt, sugar, and fat, and walk or do some kind of exercise every day. In John 10 is one of my favorite verses where Jesus said, I've come that they might have life and they may have it more abundantly. So it's not that I am suggesting that we take things away. It's I'm suggesting we go back to what God gave us in the first place. And then the question comes, so you said you started this 14 months ago. Does it work? Well, I told you a little bit about me at the beginning. Let me just give you an update. In the last 14 months, I've lost about 30 pounds. I'd lost another 30 prior to that from where I had been. And back 8 years ago, I guess it was, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, I ended up having the kind of a year that nobody would want. Gail's laughing. She remembers that year. I ended up having prostate cancer and having surgery. And I'd had some trouble with my arthritis, and I'd been on some anti-inflammatory medication, which you had to stop with the arthritis before surgery. And within 3 days of getting out of surgery, I was so inflamed that I couldn't walk. The place where we were staying was about a 2-minute walk from the parking lot to the condo. It took me an hour to get there. And so what do? I called my sister and said, I need help. And I'd never seen that happen to anybody. I'd been in practice a long time, but never seen that. So I made up my own diagnosis and said it was an acute inflammatory cascade, which is true. After I came home, I went to a rheumatologist and asked him what was going on. It was pretty dramatic. And within 5 days after they got my catheter out, they let me go back on the medicine. And within a day, I was back to being able to walk some. And so there was all this inflammation going on. And they determined that I had gout. Didn't have any of the risk factors except for being overweight. But that is, the doctor said, your body is making a little uric acid, you're getting rid of most of it, but it's saving a little bit. And your medication was keeping it under control, and you stopped the medicine and went wild. Yeah. So 8 weeks later, I ended up in Mission Hospital with open heart surgery. I had been riding my bike 25 miles a day prior to surgery, had never had any chest pain or discomfort or shortness of breath. And what they decided, all that inflammation had blocked up some of the arteries. And so I ended up with 5-vessel bypass. And so I saw that as a fluke because it was all that inflammation. I didn't have anything to do with it. And I was good afterwards and did fine. But as I noticed a few years later, probably 2 years ago, I was noticing all my life I had a resting heart rate in the 40s, between 45 and 50. Documented for years. In fact, when I went to have a knee replaced, they gave me the cardiologist, your heart rate's too slow. I said, that's just you. It's a good thing. The less your heart beats, the better. It is like you were an athlete. I was active, but not to that point. And I noticed probably 5 or 6 years after surgery that my resting heart rate had increased from 45 to 85. And I went to the cardiologist and they did tests and they said, we really don't know why that is. That most people consider that normal, so just don't worry about it. He said, we could do an angiogram to see if any of your blood vessels have closed. I wasn't real excited about that. So I said, fine, I'll live with it. 14 months ago, when I went on this different way of eating, my resting pulse was still 85. Within the last couple of months, I've all of a sudden noticed that my resting pulse rate is down in the 50s now. And without doing all the tests, my only way to explain that is some of those vessels that closed off have started opening up again. So this not only helps prevent trouble, it can treat trouble. There's lots of documentation of people who had their coronary arteries completely closed and demonstrated on angiogram. And within 2 years, they were back open again based on eating the way God told us we should have eaten in the first place. So from my standpoint, that's just my story. I think that it worked for me. And Gail, you want to tell us what happened with you?
Some of you know, a few years ago, I was quite a bit heavier. Yeah. I've struggled with weight my whole life.
Yeah. Thank you for your patience. Start over.
while I was raised a vegetarian, it wasn't a very healthy vegetarian. So I know how it is to be a junk food vegetarian. And it was about the same time in January of last year, I was hit all of a sudden with pneumonia, pleurisy, and pericarditis all at the same time. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. And so I was, my Carolyn and my daughter kept me out of the hospital, praise the Lord. But I had been praying because I knew my diet wasn't what the Lord wanted it to be. I mean, I've studied everything. I know what it says, but I was really struggling to change it. Even though I was vegetarian, I was vegan, but I knew it wasn't what it was supposed to be. And so I had been asking the Lord, please help me. I'm struggling with this. So Carolyn one day brought me this book that he was talking about, and I couldn't do anything, but I could read. So I read the book, and it's an easy read. It's really a good book. And it was like the Lord said, that's your answer. That's what I want you to do. So with the help of my daughter and Carolyn, I started that. And I lost 65 pounds total. And I feel so much better. And yes, it's easy to fall off the wagon. I've done that a few times. But I feel better when I'm on it. And a sample meal of what I would do is line my bowl with fresh spinach or some kind of greens, fresh. And then I might have rice and beans, put that in there, fresh stuff all around it, and you got a beautiful meal. And I'm finding here lately, like for instance, my taste buds are changing. I never liked sweet potatoes. I thought they were awful. I love them now. It's really strange. I'm still waiting to like okra, but we'll see about that. But yeah, I do have a couple extra of those books. If anybody's interested, let me know and I'll bring them over. But I highly recommend it. And I'm finding now as I get more and more into it, that the way the Lord gave the food to us is really the way it tastes the best. I mean, we try to make substitutes for what we're giving up. When if we eat it the way that he gives it to us, that's the best flavor. And so I highly recommend it. So
Tell about your sister. She's not here.
she's on her way. In fact, I think she's coming. She is she's 4 years older than I am. And up until like now, she's moving into my house now, but she has lived in a house where she heats with wood every day. I'll tell you, she's 74. She lives where she heats with her house with wood. She's got steep stairs in her house, and she goes up and down those multiple times a day. And she just recently, when she saw what was happening with me, she decided to give up meat. She decided to give up dairy, and she decided to follow this diet. And she's lost, I think, about 25 or 30 pounds. They're close to 30 pounds. And it's changing her a lot of attitudes about how I believe that's different from the way that she believes. And so I see the Lord just kind of drawing her in a different way, from a different path. But hopefully she'll get here, and she was working today, and hopefully she'll get here and can share her own story. So.
I've got this one. Do you want to let her go first?
We're just talking about you.
Carolyn, do you want her to go first?
You do.
Yeah.
You can go after her.
Go on up and introduce it to us. Introduce it.
Nothing like walking in a room with a
Hey, it's your turn.
welcome, welcome.
Gail just finished.
She'll never come back.
They want to hear This half for you. Since she just walked in, I'm gonna tell a little story.
Uh-oh. Can I trust you?
You have to hold my hand. So many years ago, Dwayne didn't share this, but Dwayne and I lost a brother that was between us. And he was 19 and we lost him in a drowning accident. That was the last part of June. And in August, I had to go away to academy for the first time. So obviously I was not, it was hard. I'll just say my brother and I were very close. But Artie was also a friend of my brother. And she was younger, so she was still at the academy that I had to go to. And so she took me under her wing and helped me through academy. And so I'm always indebted to Artie and very thankful that she helped me so much.
I have to talk after that.
Do you want me to stay here with you?
Okay.
So,
Well, since I haven't heard what anybody else has said, I have no idea if this is but you want to hear about my change in diet. I have to tell you first that I was raised a vegetarian. I didn't stay that way because it was presented as a religious thing. And that wasn't enough. And I ate healthy considering the way most people eat because I had that basis. But I ate meat. And so Gail obviously has talked to me many times over the years. But I had tried to lose weight and I had lost some years ago. And so I went with them to Gail to Dr. Butcher's and listened to the spiel, read the book, and was convinced that it was a healthy way to eat because of the facts and figures that they gave me. And so I got started and I did lose some weight. I've kind of plateaued, but probably because life is a little hectic right now and I haven't been eating my greens as much as I should. But I've found that it has changed my taste buds. I don't crave things I used to crave, not even chocolate as much.
That's a big deal.
Yes, it is. And my body is much steadier. Is that the right word I want? Like today, I had a good breakfast, my usual oatmeal with lots of good stuff in it. And then I've worked all day, and I had a meal bar and an apple. Am I hungry now? Yeah, but I'm not. My body didn't give out on me. I didn't get a headache. So it really changes the way my body works. I'm not sure what else.
That's okay.
how much have you lost?
Well, like I said, I've plateaued. I had lost almost 30 pounds, and now I've probably gained 5 of that back. But now it's not a good time since I'm moving in with Gail and doing other things right now.
Y'all
But
would be like the dynamic duo or something.
yeah, but it does work. It's not magic. It just works.
I've got this one. I've got this one. Oh, I can't put my hands. Well, good afternoon. My name is Patty, and I am Dwayne's wife. My story is a little different than what they have told you, but there are some things that make it different. But the first thing that I want to say is that when you're eating this way with plant-based, you always want to make sure that half of your plate, at least half of your plate, is green leafy vegetables. It doesn't matter what kind, just as long as they're green leafy vegetables. Then you can have your potato, then you can have your beans, whatever. But at least half of it should be green leafy vegetables. Every meal, yes. And when he says every meal, that includes breakfast. What I do is I will take spinach, or I will take spring mix or kale, and I will put it on the bottom of our oatmeal, and then or put it on the bottom of the bowl, and then pour the oatmeal over it, or put our oatmeal casserole over it and nuke it in the microwave. And so we have at least 1 to 2 servings of the green leafy vegetables even at breakfast. So, and you know, it's hard to think of that. At first, when our friend Karen told us about it, and she told us that that's what she did, I said, okay, I'm sorry, that's just gross. I cannot eat green leafy vegetables for breakfast. But now I love it. I love it. So back to my story. Dwayne and I were married in February of 2020, just a couple weeks before everything was shut down with COVID. And so fast forward to a year ago, January, before we had made the decision to go Plant Strong, I had packed on 20 pounds. And I couldn't get it off. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how much exercise, because Dwayne and I, in the summertime, we ride our bicycles anywhere between 15 and 30 miles, 3 to 4 days a week. And so I'm still packing on all of this weight, and the doctors can't figure out what it is. They've run all the tests. Nothing is wrong. I'm okay. And so we get to January of 2021, and Dwayne says, let's call Karen and let's find out what it is that she does. So we called, and we began that very day on Plant Strong. Cleaned out all the cupboards, got rid of everything that shouldn't be in the house. At that time, we gave some of the stuff to Carolyn and Bob, and to Mary Beth, our daughter, and her husband. And we just cleaned everything out so that we wouldn't be tempted. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to cook without olive oil, but I'm going to cook without olive oil. And the key to that, this is just a side note, is cooking where you would normally use your olive oil, is to use vegetable broth, low salt vegetable broth, rather than oil. So anyway, so we begin this lifestyle. I don't call it a diet because it isn't a diet, it's a lifestyle. So we begin that, and in February, by the middle of February, it was a month later, I had my blood work done, and my blood work, my cholesterol had come down 48 points within 4 weeks. So, you know, I said, okay, this is what it's supposed to do. I had also lost 11 pounds during that month. And Dwayne was losing weight. We went to my brothers and we told them about it. They went on it and they started losing weight. Well, about that time, I started gaining weight again. And so from, say, February of 2021 until October of 2021, I put on another 20 pounds. And we couldn't figure out what it was. I'm eating right, I'm exercising, we're riding our bikes. And so Dwayne says it has to be something metabolic, but I don't know what it is. And so we went to Dr. Diaz, and she is licensed in lifestyle medicine, geriatrics, and internal medicine. And so I told her my story, and she said the same thing. She said, it has to be metabolic. The way that you're eating, the weight should be dropping off of you, just like it did with Dwayne, like it did with your brother and your sister-in-law. I mean, he lost 30, my brother lost 40, my sister-in-law lost she lost 30, and here I am. I'm just packing it all on, everything that they're losing. And so, even though I'm eating correctly. And so I was quite discouraged. And she said, well, we're going to run some blood tests and find out what is wrong. So the blood work came back, and it was metabolic. I have hypothyroidism, which is where your thyroid isn't working correctly. Put me on medication, and I had she gave me a diagnosis of Hashimoto's, which is a autoimmune disease. The average marker for your antibodies is 9. Mine was 426.
Anti-thyroid.
Pardon me?
Anti-thyroid.
The anti-thyroid, yes. And so she gives me the medication for the thyroid, and I start taking it, and I'm feeling really good. And about 3 weeks later into it, I start hitting a wall again. And when I say hitting a wall, I'm doing fine now. 5 minutes from now, I can't function. There's nothing that I can do. So Dwayne calls Dr. Diaz again, and we order more blood work. She increases my medication. And so we go along another 3 or 4 weeks with the new medication, and I start hitting the wall again. And so this has happened. We're on 5 times now. We're getting ready to have to do that because I'm hitting the wall again. But she did my blood work in January, and the antibodies had gone up to 550 something. She did my blood work again in March, and they had escalated to 860. And so when I went to see her,
These antibodies are destroying the thyroid.
yes, she said, and that's what she explained. She said, these antibodies are attacking your thyroid. They're literally killing your thyroid. So she said, we have to get this taken care of. And so now we're coming to the exception of the rule about drinking your calories. Because when I went in, I had told Dwayne, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something drastic with my weight if she doesn't have a plan tomorrow. She has to have a plan for me. I mean, I was stressed out. The weight keeps coming on. I keep hitting the wall. The medication stops working. And so I said, she has to have a plan. So we prayed. We prayed that afternoon. We prayed that evening. We prayed the next morning that she would have a plan for me. And so we went in, and she said, I have something that I need us to try. And I said, oh, praise God. There's help coming. And so she said, she handed me these 6 sheets of paper, and they were all smoothie recipes. And she said, I want you to do these smoothies. I want you to take I have a Vitamix, but your blender. And she said, you fill that up and you press it down to make sure that the green leafy vegetables are packed in 75% of that blender. And then the other 25%, excuse me, is done with fruit. And the only reason that fruit is in there is to give it palatable taste so that you can get the smoothie down. And so she said, I want you to try that for 6 weeks. and we're going to run your blood work again. And she said, we want to see if this has any effect. Well, we went home and we Googled this doctor. Her name is Goldner. What's her first name? Brooke Goldner. And she cured herself of lupus in 6 weeks. 6 weeks doing nothing but the green leafy vegetables, 75%, 25% fruit, and then anything else she ate was raw vegetables or raw food, or food.
What liquid do you put in it?
Water.
Or just
Water. You cover the she said to fill it up, pack it in with the green leafy vegetables, and then fill it up to the top of the vegetables, and then put in your fruit. Also, a half a cup of omega, half a cup of flaxseed, which is your own no, not ground. You put it in whole, but the blender will ground it up. Because if it's already ground before you put it in, it loses the omega-3s. So you need to, pardon me?
It oxidizes.
Yes. So you need to put that in. If you don't like that, you can also use chia seed, or you can use half of each, whichever you want. And so we said, well, this goes against everything that we have learned with Engine 2, but I have to do this for me. So I've been on it now for 2.5 weeks. I feel great, except I'm starting to hit a wall again. So they're going to have to increase my medication. But I am feeling wonderful. But what I was getting ready to say is she cured herself 16 years ago with this. Her husband came up with he's a health enthusiast, and he came up with this. Actually, he came up with it so that she was eating 1.5 pounds of green leafy vegetables a day. And she was just dying trying to chew all of these vegetables, 1.5 to 2 pounds of green leafy vegetables a day. So he said, okay, let's put it into a smoothie. And so in 6 weeks, she cured herself of lupus, and she has been cured for 16 years. Now she continues this. She has cured Hashimoto's with this. She has cured diabetes. There's a whole list of things that she has been able to cure over the years with doing this. So what I want to say is what he has said, drinking your calories on a normal basis, I'm going to say that, yes, I agree with this, but there are sometimes extenuating circumstances where we have to do something different. So it's still all plant-based. And the main things that you want to do if you do this, or if you have to do this, is you're intentionally overdosing your body with omega-3s and anti-inflammatory foods for healing. And I will insert here that I started it on a Wednesday. On Friday evening, the insides of my knees just ached all the time. My legs at night, when I would sit down, they would just hurt all the time. And within 2 days of doing this, the inflammation was gone out of my legs. I haven't had to take anything for the pain of the inflammation. It's gone. It's finished. My son has started on this, and he had to take his Vitamix back because he had purchased it 2 weeks ago, and in 3 days it burned up. So he took it back. Vitamixes don't do that. They're not supposed to do that. But anyway, he got a hold of a bad one. And silly him, he had 2 Big Franks. And within 2 hours, every joint in his body was aching, was hurting, because he had put something back into his diet that he had taken out, And now he has put that inflammatory food back into his system, and instantly his body reacted. And so she documents a lot of this, even more than just our two cases. But anyway, there's 6 steps that you have to do, or that you're doing in this process. And the first one is you want to eliminate all animal products, everything, all. And I said, I've been a vegetarian for 40 years. For the most part. Once in a while, I would eat turkey at Christmas or Thanksgiving, but for the most part, I've been a vegetarian for 40 years. And so it wasn't hard for me, except for the cheese. I loved cheese. If I wanted a snack, I normally didn't grab for a handful of chips or a handful of cookies. I went to the refrigerator and pulled out a piece of cheddar cheese because I loved cheddar cheese. I loved eggs. I could eat my weight in eggs. Egg salad sandwiches, just plain egg salad, scrambled eggs and cheese. I mean, I was there, but I'm not there now. We went to Florida for a month in February, and our daughter and son-in-law and their kids came down, and I heard the kids talking, "Mom, can't we have scrambled eggs?" Because I didn't have it in the house. I wasn't making it. So I told Dwayne, I said, we need to go to the store. We need to get some eggs so I can make the kids some scrambled eggs. I mean, that's what grandma does. So I made the scrambled eggs, and I said, oh, those look so good. So I put a spoonful on my plate, and I put a bite of it in my mouth, and I could not stand the taste of those eggs. I said, somebody has to take these eggs, or I'm gonna throw them away. And little David says, I want them. So I gave him my eggs. But somebody said before, your taste buds change, and they do change, and it doesn't come overnight. Sometimes it takes several weeks. Sometimes for some people, it takes several months, but it isn't instantaneous, but sometimes it is instantaneous. It just depends on you. So we are eliminating all animal products, and we're eliminating all added oils. If there's oils already in the food, I'm not talking about processed food. I'm just talking if there's already an oil in it, naturally, you're not going to add any more. Eliminate all oil. That's number 2. Number 3, eliminate all processed foods. You cannot have any processed foods with what I'm talking about. Because number 4, you're hyponourishing yourself with raw plant foods, and that's what your body you're putting all of these raw foods in to hyponourish it. That's why you're having to do the smoothies, 1.5 to 2 pounds of green leafy vegetables a day. You need to consume that omega-3 every day. It doesn't matter if it's flaxseed or if it's chia seed or a combination thereof. And she says a half a cup of either or. And then you want to do water. And with this, she says at least 96 ounces of water. But good thing is you're putting in approximately a 30 of water in your smoothie, and that water counts as part of the 96 ounces of water. So that makes it a little better if you're not a big water drinker. So I think that is my story. And so that is where I am going. I have lost 4 pounds. And so that is good. I have a sister-in-law that is terribly inflamed. And we've got her on it. She's terribly overweight. And she went on this. She started on Tuesday. And by Thursday, Tuesday night. She drank a whole 64 ounce in one evening. I don't know how she did that because you really feel full. And so she drank all that, and then she went to work on Wednesday, drank another 64 fluid ounces of it, plus all of her water. She started out at 225 pounds, and on Thursday morning, she was 217. So, and the pain in her body is leaving, and so it works. If you have a problem in any of these areas, or you just want to hypernourish, then you can do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say that, difference between drinking your food and eating it. I think one of the things is the difference between, what do they call that, juicing machine?
Yeah.
Where separating it.
No. You don't want to juice it.
But you're blending it. What you're doing is you're blending it, so you're getting all the fiber, getting everything you want.
Right. So, and that's the thing. You don't want to use a juicer with this because you have to have the fiber. You're taking all of the nourishment out and only getting the calories if you are juicing it. So you have to have that fiber. That's what is going to go in and do the work in your body. Anybody else? Okay, I'm done. Yeah, yes, Gail.
One of the things that we tried this year, in trying to get all of the greens in, is we had a lot of extra ones, like from the garden and when they were on sale and stuff, and we dried them and powdered them, and you can add them in powdered, dry them at a low temperature so it keeps all the nutrition, and then you add it into anything, and you get all sorts of greens that way too.
I don't know anything about doing that, but
How much you learned about how to keep the fruits.
pardon me?
How to keep the fruits.
What do you mean? Oh, in the process of all of this, I'm sure we all buy fresh fruits, especially berries. And actually, my son came up with this. I don't know that he came up with it, but he called me and told me, try it. It works. We always have a hard time eating the fruits up fast enough so that the berries don't start rotting. And so we have been putting them in a quart jar, canning jar, yes, and sealing it and putting it in the refrigerator. I had a jar of berries that we took to Virginia Beach. We had bought them. We took them to Virginia Beach. We were gone a week, came back, and they were still good 2 weeks later. So that if you have trouble, keeping your berries fresh, put them in a canning jar. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I've got two questions about autoimmune diseases. I've got a friend who's struggling with Lyme disease, and then I'm struggling with hives, urticaria. So I was wondering if those...
I'm not a physician or a daughter of a physician. I am married to a physician. But the only thing I can tell you is that Dr. Goldner recommends this for any autoimmune problem, any kind of these diseases. She doesn't guarantee that it's going to cure it because everybody is different. But in the back of her book, what's the name of the book?
Goodbye Autoimmune Disease.
Yes, Goodbye Autoimmune Disease.
Goodbye Lupus. 2 books.
2 books. The one that I would recommend is the Goodbye Autoimmune Disease because it covers not only telling you how to do this and why you need to do it, but she has self-helps in there because she's also a psychiatrist. And so she has self-helps in there to tell you, to find out your why. Why do you want to do this? How important is it to you to do it? Don't sabotage yourself. You can set yourself up. Oh, I'm going to a party. Let's see, I think I'm going to have a piece of that cake. But she says, don't make a plan to sabotage yourself, and never leave home without your water and without juice. Always, smoothies, not juice, smoothies. Never leave home without your smoothies because you never know when you're going to need to drink it. Goodbye Goodbye.
Goodbye Autoimmune Disease by Brooke with an E on the end,
Goldner.
Goldner, Goldner. And to answer the question here, neither Lyme disease nor urticaria are autoimmune diseases. Sometimes the complications of them may be somewhat related. It'd be worth a try. You'll know within 2 weeks if it's going to work, but it's not specifically an autoimmune disease.
No, it won't hurt. You're right.
Any other questions,
The-
Laura?
How much of that smoothie do you eat a day?
64 fluid ounces.
Okay, so
Yeah. Right.
and 3 different times.
Right,
a day, like
right.
every day?
Yeah, yeah. It's just too much to drink it all at once.
Right.
Anything else? Anyone else?
Your smoothies that you drink them at room temperature?
No, I put them in the refrigerator. They're already cold when you make them because you want to use frozen fruits. So when you use the frozen fruits, that makes it cold, but we keep them in the refrigerator.
What frozen fruit do you like?
Well, I use bananas. I freeze the bananas. That does real well with making it sweet. Not green bananas. They have to be dark, ripe bananas. We like to use oranges, pineapple, mango, berries, lots of berries, specifically blueberries and strawberries, and raspberries, but whatever fruit it is that you like. And it's, Dr. Diaz gave me recipes, 5 different recipes, but I make my own because I didn't like the mixture of the ones, but I do that when I cook anyway. I don't follow a recipe.
One of the important things is to change up. Don't eat the same thing
Yeah.
every day. I think it's
Yeah.
called use different fruits.
And I'll tell you one vegetable that's a green leafy vegetable that makes the smoothies really, really smooth is Napa cabbage. The Napa cabbage, it just has a smooth taste when you put your fruits with it. Whereas sometimes spinach or kale, depending upon the type of kale, it can taste kind of bitter even when you have the fruits in. But the Napa cabbage is awesome.
Avocado does the same thing.
You can use, as long as you, yes. And that's the other thing. As long as you're eating 1.5 smoothing 1.5 to 2 pounds of green leafy vegetables a day, you can have all the avocados that you want because it's good fat. Carolyn had it.
Why don't you tell them what is considered a green? What are your green vegetables?
Well, and I have found some that I did not think was green. You've got your spinach, you've got your kale, you've got your Napa cabbage, you have your all of your spring mix, the broccoli. The one that I did not know was a green leafy vegetable is cauliflower. And that is considered a green leafy vegetable. I would never have thought
It's a
that.
cruciferous vegetable.
Right, yes.
What about romaine?
No, it is not. It's green and it's leafy, but it's not a cruciferous. Yeah, that. Cruciferous, green leafy, yeah. So that does not count. Iceberg is like eating water. Spring, yeah, because it's full of chard, it's full of spinach, it's full arugula, it has all of that in it. So that's good. Yeah. In fact, I make salads every day with that. It's very good.
So are you eating only the smoothies? You're not eating?
Well, Dr. Goodner recommends that if you're going to do more than just the smoothies, you eat only green leafy vegetables and fruit. Okay, until you're well.
They do recommend this for 6 weeks
Yeah, 6 weeks.
for the healing process. And then you can start eating other foods along with it. Start adding
So-
food.
So you'll have a salad with your smoothie.
Yeah, usually, yeah. In the morning and, I mean, at noon and in the evening, yeah. Gail?
In your salad, do you put like tomatoes or cucumbers or?
I don't because we like fruit in ours better. So I will take the spring mix and I have this little, I don't know what you call it, chopper. And I chop the spring mix up because we like the salad not so big. And I will put half of an avocado on it, and I'll put some blueberries and strawberries on it, or raspberries, and I season it with because I have to have salt for my thyroid, so I season it with salt and basil, oregano, garlic powder, and Italian seasoning, and I mix it up, and it tastes good just like that. I mean, but you can use, your dressing as well. I have found a real good vegan salad dressing made with oranges and trying to think of everything, garlic, a little bit of lemon juice. I'll have to get you the recipe. I don't have it with me. So, but that's real good. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, we use frozen vegetables. It isn't specific, but I mean frozen fruit. Yeah, frozen fruit. It makes the smoothie cold, and if it's frozen, then you can have an abundance of it in your freezer without it going bad.
But you can use fresh also.
Yeah, whatever you want to use. Not frozen vegetables though. You have to use fresh vegetables. Anybody else? Okay,
Thank you.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 3. It's number 3. It's 3. It's turned off. The microphone's turned off.
Let's have smoothies tomorrow.
We're going to switch. Okay. Give us some enthusiasm, right? About our health and think about things we can change and get back to natural food as God created it. That's the best thing, isn't it? We take food and mess it up. Think of what a potato chip is. What happened to that potato? Wow. Made a potato chip. Anyway, so we mess up natural food, just plain. Well, our Sabbath's coming close to an end. What, Carol? Yeah, but we have some. We have questions. No, we're done. Let me talk to Sandra.